They called them in one by one. Old acquaintances, former rivals, people who once tried to dismantle you, people who once thought they understood the rules of your existence. Each person entered with a subtle pretense of control, the way people pretend they are the hunters when in truth they are being watched. Cameras, microphones, recorders, not for you, for them. The investigators, the reporters, the ones desperate for a story they could frame without fear, without reckoning. But as each voice cracked, faltered, or refused entirely, something shifted. They all said the same thing, no comment. The phrase repeated like a mantra, hollow, defensive, and exposed. Eyes darted, bodies recoiled slightly, hands fidgeted behind backs, some averted gaze entirely. The room became a gallery of avoidance, of unspoken confessions and thinly veiled guilt. They didn't speak because they couldn't, not because they feared consequences, but because they feared recognition. The recognition that someone had already observed them fully, and that observation wasn't forgiving. Every reporter, every interviewer, every observer in the room could feel it, the weight of absence, the gravity of avoidance. The very air shifted, tight around those who had once crossed you. Something in them recoiled, as if touching a wound that had never healed properly. They had all been warned, individually and collectively, by whispers, by subtle events, by things they couldn't categorize. But warnings had limits. Warnings fade, experiences endure. And now, when pressed, they could only look away. Some tried to construct sentences, half-measured and cautious. It wasn't personal. We didn't stop mid-sentence. Eyes flicked to the floor. Their words dissolved into stutters, into the void that only awareness of someone else's depth can produce. They couldn't lie fully, couldn't tell the story they wanted to tell, because the truth lived outside their control. The truth lived in you. The first one who tried to speak, an old colleague who once sought to humiliate you publicly, swallowed hard and muttered, "Can't." Eyes wide, hands gripping the table as if holding on to the physical world would anchor him against the internal one he refused to confront. They all understood what he meant, even if no one said it aloud. Whatever you had become, whatever had unfolded inside you, could not be reduced to anecdotes or interviews. It could not be confined within language, and they all knew it. There was a rhythm to it, subtle but unmistakable. Their hesitation, their shifting gaze, their instinctive retreat. It wasn't a fear of punishment. It wasn't a fear of law or society. It was something older, something primal. The recognition that you were not ordinary, that you had moved through moments they had only survived through luck, through calculation, through compromises they couldn't admit even to themselves. They didn't understand what they were facing, but their bodies remembered it anyway. The cameras captured silence. The microphones caught hesitation. The transcripts will show no comment. But the room will never forget. Because silence is not nothing. Silence is an echo. Silence is the trace of a force that refuses to bow to narrative. And in this room, every trace pointed to you. Someone tried to break it. We just want to understand. The words floated, empty and fragile. But understanding requires permission, and you had never granted it, not fully, not to anyone who tried to measure you, to quantify you, to dissect you. The room understood this without needing explanation. That subtle, immovable barrier that existed around you wasn't built from walls or words. It was built from the accumulation of every boundary they had once crossed, every misstep, every underestimation. It was proof, tangible yet invisible, that they had overreached before and learned nothing. And then they did something almost desperate. They began to circle, subtly, like predators measuring terrain, looking for a crack, a sliver of weakness, a sentence that would give them leverage. But the energy in the room resisted, not loudly, not dramatically, but enough that every step they took seemed heavier. Every breath they drew became aware of the weight pressing against it. Every eye, every nervous tick, every forced smile revealed that they were not in control, not of you, not of the narrative, not of themselves. A woman, someone who once tried to manipulate your decisions for her gain, said it aloud without thinking. We were told you're dangerous." Her voice was low, almost involuntary. She thought she was accusing, labeling, containing. But in truth, it was a confession, and everyone understood it. Because danger, in this context, wasn't just physical. It wasn't aggression. It was the quiet force of being untouchable by expectation. It was the slow, deliberate shift that occurs when someone's presence renders pretense meaningless. And they had all just confirmed it about you. Another one tried to argue, to frame it as exaggeration, as misinterpretation. "No, it's not like that. We didn't." They stopped again, not because you spoke, not because you moved, but because they were thinking about every failure they had faced at your hands, every plan undone, every strategy reversed, every time they believed they understood you and realized they didn't. And that realization is heavier than confrontation. It is something they cannot undo. The tension built silently, imperceptibly at first, then like a tide rising in a quiet ocean. It wasn't a crescendo of noise or panic. It was a crescendo of awareness. Each person in that room felt it differently, but all felt it. The boundary you carry is not fragile. It is not reactive. It is preemptive. It is aligned with something they cannot see, but instinctively know exists. Something that has followed you longer than any of them have noticed. Something that calibrates, observes, and decides. Something that allows you to exist untouched by the ordinary chaos they so eagerly throw into the world. And then someone, one of the most audacious, one who had once tried to humiliate you publicly in front of others, leaned forward slightly, voice shaking despite control. Who even protects you? The question hung in the air like smoke. Not a challenge, not a demand, an admission of ignorance, of awe, of recognition. And it didn't require an answer, because the truth was already visible in the space between them. Something shifts when people like that, those who once tried to control, manipulate, dismantle, face a boundary they cannot penetrate. Their eyes tell the story. Their hands betray hesitation. Their mouths struggle for words. And they are confronted by the simplest truth. They are not in charge here. Never were. And now, even asking questions confirms it. The first half of the room breaks under the weight of their own expectation. They came expecting statements. They came expecting a narrative. They came expecting control. Instead, they found observation, measurement, a presence they had never encountered and cannot reduce. And it all traces back to you. They exchange glances. A subtle panic begins to thread through the corners of their composure. Not fear in the ordinary sense, something more nuanced, something that whispers, they know they cannot predict you. They know you have moved past their categories of comprehension, and they know, without articulating it, that every attempt to define you, to contain you, to dissect you, has already failed, and yet they linger. They cannot leave, not yet, because curiosity, that relentless, foolish human trait, holds them in place. They want to understand. They crave confirmation. They need to measure what they failed to measure when it mattered most. And that is when the shift begins to take shape. It starts with posture. Someone straightens, but not out of confidence, out of instinct, as if bracing for something unseen, but undeniably present. Another adjusts their sleeves, hiding the tremble. A third exhales too slowly, too carefully, betraying the calculation behind the act. These are not the signs of people facing danger. These are the signs of people facing accountability they never prepared for. The investigators in the room notice it too. They stare at the old enemies, confused by the synchronized discomfort. They expected bitterness, arrogance, confessions, maybe even satisfaction in recounting what they did to you. But they received none of it. Instead, they saw a group of people haunted by the weight of unspoken experiences they had no intention of revisiting aloud. Then one of the interviewers leans forward and asks the simplest question possible. Why is everyone hesitating? The room freezes, not because the question is bold, not because it is piercing, but because every person who once crossed you recognizes that answering it honestly would expose the very thing they've spent years trying to bury, the moment they realized they miscalculated you beyond recovery. They stay silent for long enough that the interviewer repeats the question, this time slower, sharper. Why can none of you give a statement? Still nothing. A few eyes flick toward the exit, not to escape, but to check if the door is closed, as if the truth might slip through cracks if they're not careful. Others stare at the floor, the table, their own hands, anywhere except directly at the person questioning them. They want to speak. They genuinely do. But every sentence they form dies before it reaches their mouth. Finally, someone exhales and mutters, "You're asking us to explain something we don't fully understand." The room tilts slightly, as if the floor itself reacts. They try to clarify, but their words break in the middle. "It wasn't supposed to go like that. We thought we had it under control. We thought..." Silence cuts them off, not from fear of repercussions, but from the awareness that whatever they are about to admit will change the entire atmosphere of the room. They glance at one another again, but this time, the glances hold more weight. A silent agreement that no one wants to be the first to reveal what truly happened. And yet, all of them know what the others experienced, because they all carry the same residue. The moment they realized you are not someone to cross casually. The moment they realized you do not collapse, you do not crumble, you do not beg, you do not bend, you absorb, you adapt, you observe. And then when they least expect it, you respond with precision they never saw coming. One of them finally breaks. We all tried something at different times, for different reasons. They swallow hard. And every time, something shifted that we couldn't explain. The interviewer frowns. Shifted how? The person doesn't answer, not because they're hiding the truth, but because the truth can't be simplified into a sentence without sounding absurd. They know that if they describe what they witnessed, the sudden reversal, the unexpected resilience, the way their own actions circled back on them, it will sound like exaggeration, like paranoia, like guilt masking itself as superstition. But it wasn't superstition, it was cause and effect, except the effect was always sharper, cleaner, more decisive than they imagined. And the cause wasn't aggression or revenge. The cause was you simply refusing to be dismantled. Someone else tries explaining it differently. It's not what happened, it's how it happened. A nervous laugh from another corner. Not amusement, but disbelief at themselves. Every time we tried to step over them, things just reorganized. The interviewer lifts a brow. Reorganized? The person nods without lifting their eyes. Like the consequences rearranged themselves. Like the outcome had already been decided before we acted. But they don't mean destiny. They don't mean supernatural intervention. They mean the simple, brutal truth. You were always 10 steps ahead without announcing it. They underestimated your intelligence, your resilience, your ability to endure pressure without folding. They read you like a simple book when you were a locked vault with rotating chambers. They didn't have the tools to open. The more they speak, the more the room feels like it's closing in. Someone rubs their temples, muttering. The first time I crossed them, I thought it was over for them. A pause. But it was me who ended up losing everything I tried to take. Another nods. Same, I pushed them hard, and it circled back. Every mistake we made with them was permanent, someone else says quietly. It stayed. It didn't fade like it usually does with people. These aren't dramatic statements. They aren't exaggerations. They are admissions from people who finally realized they weren't dealing with someone fragile or predictable. They were dealing with someone built differently. Not loudly, not violently, not theatrically, but structurally, deeply, quietly. And this is what terrifies them the most. They were wrong about you in ways they can never undo. They lost access to understanding the moment they misjudged you. And now, being asked to explain what happened forces them to relive a psychological terrain they've spent years avoiding. A third interviewer, sensing the tension, shifts strategy. Listen, they say gently. We're not asking for details. We're asking for clarity. What is it about this person that none of you are willing to talk about? Every old enemy stiffens at the same time. It is almost synchronized, the way bodies respond when a thought becomes too close to articulate. One rests their elbows on their knees, staring at the floor. Another clasps their hands tightly. A third pulls their chair closer to the table. A fourth keeps glancing at the door again, as if expecting someone to enter. Finally, a voice from the far corner, low, tired, honest. You want to know the truth? Fine. None of us want to say anything because we don't want to be the reason they return to our attention. The room goes still, not because the sentence is dramatic, but because it is true. They don't fear you as a threat. They fear you as a mirror that reflects their intentions back at them with impossible accuracy. They don't want to speak because they know that speaking pulls memory into motion. And memory is the last thing they want awakened. Every recollection is a trap, a reminder of the errors they cannot undo. Every word they utter risks revealing more than they intend. And yet here they are, exposed in a room that refuses to let their avoidance go unnoticed. Someone shifts in their seat. The sound is louder than it should be, jarring, because every movement is amplified by the tension. They realize slowly that the room is no longer just a space for testimony. It has become a theater for self-exposure. And in this theater, every instinct they relied on, every clever tactic to navigate past you, collapses quietly, irrevocably. A hand rises tentatively, as if the act of lifting it could be mistaken for submission. I shouldn't be saying this, the person begins, voice tight. But you have to understand, when we dealt with them, it wasn't like dealing with anyone else. Every move we made, every strategy we thought would work, failed in ways that weren't just inconvenient. They were humiliating, subtle, surgical, unavoidable. Another shifts, eyes narrowing, voice softer, almost a whisper. They observed, always, not loudly, not like someone announcing power, just observing, learning, waiting. And when the time came, they acted not with force, but with precision. And that is what's impossible to describe. Because it's not revenge, it's inevitability. And inevitability is frightening in a way no anger could ever be. Silence settles again, heavy, tangible. They glance at one another, and for a moment, they're a collection of witnesses, not just to events that unfolded, but to their own repeated failures, their own miscalculations, their own inability to predict the unshakable force standing quietly, almost invisibly, against them. One finally leans forward, speaking fast now, words spilling because the dam of restraint is breaking. We all thought we could corner them, each of us, in different ways, different times, different methods. And every single time we tried, it failed. Not partly, not almost, completely, and worse. It reflected on us. Everything we tried to hide, everything we thought was safe, suddenly wasn't. It showed, exposed, and we couldn't stop it, because they weren't just prepared. They were untouchable in ways we didn't even have the vocabulary for. A pause, long. Everyone in the room feels it, the weight of unspoken admissions pressing down, demanding recognition. They didn't have to threaten anyone. They didn't have to intimidate. They didn't have to show force. They didn't need to do anything dramatic. They just existed. And by existing, they corrected the course of every situation we tried to manipulate. Every single one. And we knew it, deep down, but saying it out loud. The voice falters, makes it real, and none of us want to make it real. Another voice joins in, steadier this time, almost chilling in its composure. It's not that we're afraid of them in the traditional sense, it's that we're afraid of ourselves, of how little we knew, of how wrong we were. And we can't articulate it without admitting our own incompetence, the blind spots that led us here. That's what terrifies everyone who ever tried to cross them. Not the person themselves, but the reflection of what we were doing, what we thought we controlled, how easily it slipped from our hands. The interviewers exchange glances. They came here expecting drama, confession, stories of malice or revenge. Instead, they face a quiet storm of recognition, a unanimous, unspoken acknowledgement of someone they tried and failed to control, someone who existed outside their framework, someone who redefined the very rules of engagement without a single gesture of violence. And as the room absorbs this, a strange phenomenon begins. The air thickens, not with threat, not with tension, but with comprehension. The kind of understanding that arrives slowly, painfully, almost cruelly. Every old enemy recognizes that they underestimated you in ways that cannot be measured or compensated for. Every attempt to rationalize, to explain, to justify, collapses under the weight of that realization. A hand, trembling this time, finally meets the table. I can't describe it accurately. I can't say it in words that won't sound insane. But what we experienced, what we learned, it wasn't just that they reacted. It was that nothing we did ever caught them off guard. They anticipated, adapted, survived, and then, when the moment came, they acted. And the impact, the consequences, were always precise, inevitable, and inescapable. A low hum of agreement threads through the room. Not spoken, not intentional, but understood. They're all connected in this acknowledgement. Every single person who ever attempted to cross you has faced this same silent verdict. The margin for error was zero, and every misstep, no matter how minor, became permanent, etched into memory like a scar they cannot ignore. One more voice rises, a quiet, a deliberate. I thought I knew how people work. I thought I could read intentions, predict behavior, but with them, every assumption I made failed. Every instinct I trusted betrayed me. And now I see that the people who underestimated them weren't merely mistaken. We were blind. And the realization of that blindness is worse than anything else. Worse than punishment. Worse than revenge. It's the understanding that you were never in control. And control. We all crave it. A few nods. Slight. Almost imperceptible, but real. They don't speak because they cannot speak without dismantling themselves. The admission itself is a vulnerability they've avoided for years, and yet, forced into this room, confronted with the reality of your presence, they begin, haltingly, to acknowledge it. They look at one another again, and for the first time, the silence carries weight beyond fear. It carries the weight of respect, born from realization. Not admiration, not gratitude, not love, respect. The kind that arrives after countless failures, after misjudgment, after repeated underestimation. The kind that cannot be faked, cannot be manipulated, cannot be denied. And they know, without needing confirmation, that you recognize it too. That you have always recognized it. The subtle panic, the hesitation, the carefully concealed acknowledgement of your strategic supremacy. You see it, catalog it, internalize it, and let it exist without comment. You do not need to assert dominance. You simply allow them to face their own failure. Time stretches. Each second feels longer, heavier, more acute. The investigators, the old enemies, everyone in the room feels the gravity of the moment. Because you do not demand recognition, but it is unavoidable. You do not seek control, but control exists in the way you exist. You do not enforce consequences, but they arrive naturally, meticulously, in response to actions that were misjudged, underestimated, or ignored. The first interview ends, but the effect lingers. No one in the room walks away the same. Their composure, once carefully constructed, has cracks now. Cracks that cannot be filled, because the architecture of underestimation has collapsed. And through it all, you remain silent, unshaken, almost invisible in your composure, yet entirely present in the memory of everyone who thought they could outmaneuver you. The room empties, the echoes of confessions still vibrating in the air, leaving silence, pregnant, dense, almost tangible. You do not follow, do not linger unnecessarily. You leave on your own terms, with the same quiet composure that has defined every interaction, every encounter, every unspoken lesson. And yet, the effect does not leave with you. It lingers, like a shadow that refuses to shrink in the fading light. Those who remained feel it, deep in the spine, a subtle tremor of understanding. That you are no ordinary presence, no negotiable variable, no pattern to be solved. You are the axis around which all their assumptions collapse. Out in the open, the air seems lighter, but the world itself feels subtly altered, as if reality has bent slightly to accommodate the truth they now cannot unsee. You step into the streets, into the spaces where life continues its shallow rhythms, and yet, every glance, every whisper, every hesitant pause as someone catches sight of you carries an invisible weight. You do not acknowledge it. You do not need to. Their reactions are yours to observe, catalog, and understand. Every moment becomes an extension of what they failed to grasp, a living record of miscalculation and underestimation. People move around you, unaware, unaware in the way only the oblivious can be. But you know they notice, not in the way of fear, not in the way of admiration, but in the piercing clarity that comes from recognition. That instant where comprehension collides with realization, and they understand, in the half-second before denial overtakes them, the magnitude of what they confronted, what they dismissed, and what they are powerless to resist now. And it is here, in the subtle, unspoken acknowledgement of your existence, that the true power manifests. Not through noise, not through spectacle, not through coercion, but in the simple, unwavering truth of presence. They cannot define you, cannot categorize you, cannot predict the trajectory of your actions because they are not linear. They are not governed by convenience. They are not contained within the margins they thought existed. You are outside the frame, outside the reach, outside the domain of ordinary consequence. You move deliberately, with precision, but there is no performative element in your stride. Every step is measured, every gesture intentional, but devoid of ostentation. Yet those who have attempted to cross you cannot help but measure it, analyze it, fear it, because even in absence you command attention. Their minds, trained to anticipate, to manipulate, to strategize, now twist upon themselves, attempting to decode what is intentionally undecodable. The night falls. Shadows grow long and sharp, slicing through the city like the memory of every error made in your presence, and you become both observer and participant in the unfolding of your environment. Nothing escapes you. Nothing slips past the keen edge of perception that has been honed by necessity, by challenge, by the unending series of tests imposed by those who failed to anticipate you. And in this quiet vigilance, you are untouchable, not by luck, not by circumstance, but by sheer meticulous mastery of every interaction, every choice, every movement that could ever be made against you. News travels in small, fractured waves. Whispers, rumors, careful half-statements float through the networks of those who thought themselves immune, those who thought that silence could obscure their knowledge, their complicity, their failures, but it cannot, because you do not merely act. You exist in a way that reframes reality itself. You are a standard they did not anticipate, a rule they cannot rewrite, a force whose parameters they cannot define. And they, inevitably, realize it, slowly, reluctantly, terrifyingly, but realize it nonetheless. And then the first ripple of direct confrontation begins. Not aggressive, not overt, just inquiries, cautious, probing, cloaked in polite language, innocent tones that attempt to mask the underlying tremor of fear. And each one meets the same invisible barrier. Not a wall of threat, but a wall of perception. You are present, you are aware, you are observing, and they feel it immediately, deep in the marrow, that there is no misdirection that will escape your notice, no narrative they can shape that will hold against the unflinching scrutiny they did not anticipate. Those who attempt to test the boundaries of your patience or your tolerance find themselves navigating an invisible maze whose exits are not marked. Every tactic fails subtly, almost imperceptibly, until the cumulative effect is undeniable. They feel it in the hesitation of their speech, in the inadvertent hesitation of their gestures, in the tiny shifts of posture that betray the recognition of a presence far beyond ordinary comprehension. And it is terrifying, in a way no argument, no confrontation, no threat could ever be. Because they now understand that you do not merely act in response to what is given. You act in accordance with what is necessary. You anticipate the unseen, the unspoken, the unrecognized. You operate with a precision that is invisible, almost imperceptible, but absolute. And the implications of this understanding are crushing, not merely for them, but for anyone who ever thought themselves capable of manipulating, controlling, or predicting your actions. It spreads quietly. The wordless acknowledgement that crosses through networks, corridors, and spaces where influence and power are currency. People remember their failures, remember their misjudgments, and connect the dots to a figure who is now unmistakably outside their reckoning. Every cautionary tale, every warning they ignored, every instinct they doubted, converges in a collective realization that they were never equipped to measure, to contain, to anticipate you. And the truth settles like a shadow over their plans, their schemes, their confidence. And in this quiet, unspoken dominion, you exist, not because you demanded it, not because you imposed it, but because the space, the world, and those who navigate it are compelled by the gravity of your presence. Every attempt to resist, every thought of defiance, every plan to manipulate or outmaneuver dissolves against the inevitability of what you represent. They recognize, in fragments, in half-formed thoughts, in whispers they cannot give voice to, that nothing they do will alter the reality of your control, your awareness, your inevitability. And this is where the final calculus begins, where the cumulative weight of underestimation, misjudgment, and ignored warnings reaches the tipping point. They begin to see patterns, subtle, minute, invisible to anyone untrained, unobservant, or unprepared, that you have left not as traps, not as punishments, but as statements. Statements that they will not hear, that they cannot speak aloud, that they cannot ignore. And the brilliance of it is in the subtlety, not spectacle, not aggression, not vengeance, but inevitability, precision, mastery of cause and effect in its most refined, invisible form. And as the world continues, as life moves past them and into spaces where you exist quietly, unseen but fully present, the understanding grows. Not fear in its ordinary form, not admiration in its obvious guise, but acknowledgement, recognition, respect, forged not from words, not from demands, but from the undeniable truth of their own failures reflected back in the quiet, surgical, unrelenting clarity of your presence. This is the stage where the game ends, where the narrative collapses, and where your influence, silent, invisible, complete, becomes the standard by which all subsequent actions are measured, even if the actors are unaware of it. You do not need to speak. You do not need to assert. You do not need to strike. Everything has already occurred in the architecture of perception you constructed, in the inevitable trajectory of consequences, in the quiet domination of awareness over assumption. And this is just the beginning. The echoes of what they ignored, what they underestimated, and what they failed to predict reverberate endlessly in corridors, offices, spaces where decisions are made and alliances are forged. You are both the origin and the endpoint of this influence, not because you sought control, but because control exists in your comprehension, your observation, your existence. They cannot touch it. They cannot alter it. They cannot escape it. The night stretches onward, yet the world feels different, not in grand, obvious ways, but in the small, precise shifts that only the observant notice. Conversations are clipped, tones measured, gestures guarded. People hesitate before making moves they once considered trivial. Their instincts, previously reliable, now betray them, because the invisible standard of your presence has rewritten the rules. Every action is filtered through the memory of what they witnessed, of what they underestimated, of what they failed to account for. And in this quiet dominion, you are omnipresent without being omnipotent. There is no spectacle, there is no display of force, just the unshakable certainty of your existence. And that certainty carries more weight than any argument, more influence than any threat, more consequence than any overt attack. They feel it instinctively, the weight of being confronted with someone whose actions are untouchable because their awareness is absolute, because their strategy is invisible, because their mastery is comprehensive. You move through the world, seemingly ordinary, yet nothing you touch remains ordinary. The air bends subtly around you. Conversations shift when you enter the space. Decisions falter in your absence. Allies reconsider alliances. Enemies reassess their assumptions. Every element, every interaction, every subtle adjustment in posture or timing becomes a testament to a presence that cannot be circumvented, that cannot be manipulated, that cannot be underestimated again. And still, you do not announce yourself. You do not demand recognition. You do not confront those who doubted you. The power is in what they cannot see, in what they cannot define, in the invisible architecture of your actions. Each step, each pause, each deliberate choice sends ripples through the world, ripples that bend perception, redefine expectations, and force recalibration. They are caught in your orbit, whether they recognize it or not, and every attempt to predict or control you crumbles quietly, invisibly, inevitably. In the weeks that follow, the consequences of what transpired begin to crystallize. Those who thought themselves clever, those who relied on past tactics, those who believed they could bend events to their will, find themselves faltering. Not because of overt sabotage, not because of drama, but because the underlying calculations they ignored, the warnings they dismissed, the presence they underestimated, have quietly undone their assumptions. Every plan they enact is now filtered through the unseen influence of what they cannot account for. You. And they notice it. They notice in the tiny inconsistencies, the subtle hesitations, the imperceptible misalignments in their carefully orchestrated strategies. They notice in the uncomfortable silence, in the fleeting glance, in the inexplicable sense that something essential, something dominant, something inescapable has shifted. They notice in ways they cannot name, in ways they cannot articulate, in ways they are powerless to resist. You watch it unfold without interference, not because of restraint, but because intervention is unnecessary. You are the origin of the recalibration simply by existing in a way that cannot be ignored. And their awareness of it, slow, reluctant, terrifyingly accurate, spreads like a contagion through their networks, their circles, their spaces of influence. Every whisper, every half-word, every observation that they cannot give voice to reinforces the reality they failed to grasp, that they never had the capacity to fully measure, understand, or control you. And this is the apex of the silent dominion you hold, the culmination of all interactions, all miscalculations, all attempts to predict, manipulate, or dominate. It is not violent, it is not dramatic, it is invisible, it is inevitable, and it is complete. Those who opposed you are forced into recalibration, into reconsideration, into quiet acknowledgement of a reality that they cannot name, but that they cannot ignore. And the brilliance lies in its subtlety, the quiet obliteration of expectation, without a single overt confrontation, without a single need to demonstrate power. And still the world turns. Life continues, oblivious in many spaces, aware in some. And you continue to move through it, invisible to the unobservant, unavoidable to the perceptive. Every choice, every presence, every decision is layered with the understanding of consequence, with the mastery of perception, with the invisible choreography of influence that ensures your reality is unassailable. And those who attempt to measure you, predict you, or outmaneuver you discover, slowly, painfully, that the parameters of engagement have changed forever. And then, in the quietest moments, the reflection begins. Not in mirrors, not in screens, but in the subtle awareness of others, colleagues, former opponents, casual acquaintances, distant observers who sense, without words, without proof, without articulation, that a presence has shifted the ground beneath them. The world is subtly altered, yet the alteration is precise, deliberate, absolute. It is the sum of every encounter you have had, every silence you have maintained, every observation you have quietly enacted. And in that quiet calculus, they realize finally that they were never prepared. They realize finally that every underestimation, every dismissal, every attempt to define, categorize, or control was a failure. Not because you sought to teach a lesson, but because they themselves lacked the vision to comprehend a presence that cannot be predicted. And the knowledge that they were wrong, that they were blind to your reality, that they misjudged every variable they assumed they controlled, becomes an invisible weight that follows them in every decision, every thought, every conversation. And in that weight, they find themselves constrained, not by force, not by confrontation, not by spectacle, but by the undeniable, invisible reality of what they have encountered and cannot undo. Their options, once seemingly limitless, are now filtered through the recognition of an influence they cannot measure, a mastery they cannot approach, a presence they cannot contest. And you remain, as you always have, unshaken, unannounced, unseen by the casual eye, unforgettable to the observant. Every step you take, every space you enter, every subtle gesture becomes part of an architecture they cannot name, but cannot escape. And the effect is cumulative, quiet, relentless. The ripples extend, touching lives, altering perceptions, restructuring assumptions, all without a word, without a confrontation, without a claim. And in the end, the final truth emerges that power, true power, is not about domination or aggression. It is about presence, precision, inevitability, and mastery of perception. It is about creating a reality so complete, so carefully calibrated, so invisible in its application, that resistance becomes impossible, recognition inevitable, and influence absolute. And that is the legacy you leave in every space you enter, in every mind that notices, in every world that touches you. The room may be empty now. Conversations may continue elsewhere. Decisions may be made in other corners. Lives may proceed as they always have. But the memory of your presence, the understanding of your capability, the recognition of your inevitability persists. And that persistence is the final, inescapable reality. That those who underestimated you will forever measure themselves against an invisible standard they cannot achieve. A presence they cannot predict, a force they cannot confront. You do not return to observe them. You do not follow. You do not need to. The world has recalibrated itself around an absence that is more present than any attention could ever be. And in that recalibration, in that quiet dominance, in that subtle yet absolute influence, the ultimate victory is realized. Not through drama, not through spectacle, not through threat, but through the quiet, inevitable, unstoppable reality of existence perfected, of presence mastered, of influence achieved without a single overt demand. And as the final shadows stretch, as the city breathes in its oblivion, as the world continues, one unshakable truth remains. You are untouchable. You are uncontainable. You are unseen but unavoidable. You are the axis upon which their assumptions crumble, the standard by which their failures are measured, the force they cannot resist and cannot comprehend. And in this silent dominion, in this subtle absolute mastery, the final chapter concludes, not with noise, not with confrontation, not with acknowledgement, but with inevitability, with clarity, with the quiet power of a presence that cannot be challenged, cannot be measured, cannot be ignored. The story ends not because it must, but because it cannot be otherwise. You exist, you move, you influence, and the world, the observers, the opponents, the underestimators, are forever shaped, forever altered, forever aware that they crossed someone who cannot be contained, cannot be predicted, cannot be underestimated. And in that the last truth is revealed. The greatest power is not announced. It is understood, it is felt, it is inescapable, and it is yours. Well, well, well. They didn't send a bully this time. They didn't send brute force or loud intimidation. They didn't send someone who relied on presence alone. They sent a thinker, a strategist, someone trained to dismantle people quietly, someone whose weapon wasn't volume, but precision, someone who knew how to enter a conversation and leave you doubting your own thoughts, someone who studied patterns, behaviors, micro-reactions, someone whose job was to get inside your head, rearrange the furniture, and leave you living in a room that no longer felt like yours. They called him a mind breaker, and they were confident, not hopeful, confident, because he had ended others before you, not publicly, internally, careers stalled, voices softened, certainty eroded. People who once spoke clearly began second-guessing every sentence. That was his signature. He didn't destroy reputations. He rewired perception, and they thought you'd be no different. He arrived calm, polished, courteous in a way that felt measured, nothing wasted. Every word chosen like a chess move, made 3 turns in advance. He didn't threaten you. He didn't challenge you directly. He observed, listened, catalogued. He let others speak first while he mapped their weaknesses. He asked questions that seemed harmless but forced people to expose assumptions. He smiled when they over-explained. He nodded when they contradicted themselves. He never interrupted. He waited. He always waited. That patience had unmade people before, because waiting implies confidence, and confidence, when paired with intelligence, unsettles rooms. You noticed it immediately, not because you were intimidated, but because you recognized the pattern, the way his eyes tracked reactions instead of faces, the way he mirrored posture just long enough to build rapport, then subtly shifted to see who followed, the way his compliments were angled, never direct, always designed to create dependency. You'd seen this kind before. Not him specifically, but the function he served. A specialist trained to destabilize without leaving fingerprints. A person who wins by making others lose themselves. They expected you to engage, to defend, to clarify, to prove. That's how his work usually began. He'd pull you into a discussion, then tighten it slowly, until you were arguing against positions you never held, explaining things you never questioned, justifying instincts that never needed justification. By the time people realized what happened, they were already compromised. But you didn't engage the way he expected. You didn't rush to answer. You didn't rush to correct him. When he asked questions designed to narrow you into a corner, you didn't step forward or back. You stayed where you were, present, grounded, unmoved. You answered simply, not vaguely, simply. No excess explanation, no defensive framing, no attempt to impress. You didn't chase his approval or resist his influence. You treated him like weather passing through a room, a factor, not a threat. And that unsettled him more than open resistance ever could. He tried a different angle, introduced complexity, used language meant to overwhelm, referenced frameworks and theories meant to establish intellectual hierarchy. He spoke quickly now, stacking concepts, watching for confusion. This usually worked. People tried to keep up. Their eyes would dart, their breathing would change, their confidence would leak out through their posture. But you didn't speed up or slow down. You didn't ask him to repeat himself. You didn't pretend to follow if you didn't need to. You listened, then responded to the core, not the performance around it. One sentence, clean, accurate, enough. It landed like a reset, not because it was clever, but because it was aligned. And alignment is disarming to people who rely on distortion. For the first time, he felt resistance without opposition. There was nothing to push against, no emotional hook, no reactive energy. He couldn't locate your insecurity because you weren't broadcasting one. He couldn't provoke you into overextension. He couldn't bait you into defending an identity. You weren't trying to win the exchange. You weren't trying to dominate the room. You weren't trying to be seen as intelligent. You were just there, fully. And that began to disturb him, because his entire method depended on leverage, and leverage requires imbalance. You gave him none. So he escalated internally. He started running simulations, replaying your responses later, looking for gaps, for tells, for delayed reactions. He told himself you were masking, that everyone masks, that your calm was an act, that your simplicity was a strategy, that you were hiding something he hadn't uncovered yet. That belief kept him comfortable. If you were playing a game, then the rules still applied. He just hadn't found your weakness yet. He became more attentive, watched how you treated others, expected inconsistency, expected a slip. But you were the same with everyone. No shifts, no posturing, no change in tone when status entered the room. You didn't reward dominance or punish insecurity. You responded to what was actually there. And that consistency made his usual tools useless, because they relied on people changing when pressure was applied. He tried to outthink you. Set traps disguised as philosophical questions, moral dilemmas designed to force you into contradiction. You didn't dodge them. You didn't overanalyze them. You answered from experience, not abstraction. That frustrated him. Experience doesn't debate well on paper, but it holds up in real time. Every attempt to corner you collapsed because you weren't arguing positions. You were describing reality as you saw it. And reality doesn't need defending. It just needs articulation. The more he pushed, the clearer you became. The clearer you became, the more unstable he felt. Because clarity isn't something you can dismantle with cleverness. You can only attack it by undermining the person holding it. And you weren't attached to being right. That was the fracture point. He realized you weren't operating from ego. Not low ego, not hidden ego. No ego at all in the way he understood it. You weren't invested in how you were perceived. You weren't tracking reactions. You weren't collecting points. You weren't building an image. He couldn't threaten your identity because you weren't guarding one. And that made him uneasy. Because his entire profession revolved around identity pressure. Strip it away, and his role becomes irrelevant. He began to feel exposed, not because you were attacking him, but because his presence suddenly felt unnecessary. You didn't need to be impressed. You didn't need to be led. You didn't need to be corrected. You were already oriented. At night, his thoughts turned on him. The same analysis he used on others now looped inward. Why didn't you react? Why didn't you defend yourself? Why didn't you try to prove anything? He replayed moments, looking for manipulation on your part, and found none. No hooks, no angles, just presence. And that confused him, because presence isn't something you can dissect. It doesn't have components. It doesn't have layers. It's either there or it isn't. He realized he'd spent his life inside strategies, inside methods, inside mental constructs designed to keep him ahead of others. And suddenly those constructs felt heavy, constricting. He noticed how often he was calculating instead of listening, how rarely he was actually there, how exhausting it was to maintain control in every interaction. You weren't doing any of that, and yet you weren't losing. He tried one last tactic, direct engagement, a private conversation, no audience, no social layer. He asked you plainly what you thought of his approach. The question was loaded, designed to pull critique, to invite challenge, to establish ground for dominance. You looked at him and answered honestly. You said you thought he was intelligent. You said you thought he was sharp. You said you thought he was tired, not physically, internally. You said it without judgment, without accusation, just observation. That landed harder than anything else because it wasn't strategic. It wasn't framed to weaken him. It was simply true. And truth, when offered without intent, bypasses defenses completely. He didn't respond right away. For the first time, he couldn't. His mind searched for counterplay and found none. There was no insult to deflect, no argument to dismantle, no position to reverse. You weren't challenging his competence. You were acknowledging his cost, and no one had done that before. They either feared him or admired him. Both fed the role. You saw past it, not because you were trying to expose him, but because you weren't distracted by the performance. You were responding to the human underneath. And that unsettled him deeply, because it suggested a possibility he hadn't considered, that all his intelligence, all his control, all his success might be compensating for something unresolved. He walked away that day with a disturbance he couldn't shake. Not anger, not resentment. A quiet unraveling. His thoughts began turning inward in ways he couldn't manage. The tools he used on others didn't work on himself. He could spot cognitive traps everywhere, except the one he was living in. He began questioning his methods, not their effectiveness, but their purpose. What was he actually doing to people? What was he gaining from it? Why did winning conversations feel empty the moment they ended? Why did your calm presence feel heavier than his most elaborate strategies? He started noticing how people around him adjusted when he entered a room. How they tensed, how they performed, how they weren't themselves. And for the first time, he wondered what it would feel like to be in a room where no one had to brace. You, meanwhile, continued as you always had. You didn't check to see if he was affected. You didn't follow up. You didn't change your behavior. You didn't capitalize on the shift. You weren't trying to transform him. That was the most destabilizing part. You weren't recruiting. You weren't persuading. You weren't leading him anywhere. You simply existed the same way you always had. And that constancy forced him to confront himself without distraction. without an opponent to project onto, without a narrative to hide behind. He started realizing that his intelligence had become a shield, a way to stay above feeling, a way to avoid vulnerability, a way to maintain distance while appearing engaged. And that recognition hurt, because it meant the thing he was most proud of was also the thing keeping him disconnected. He tried to rationalize it, told himself you were an outlier, that your way wasn't scalable, that presence without strategy only works in limited contexts. But the rationalizations felt thin. He couldn't unsee what he'd seen. You weren't special because you were superior. You were grounded because you were integrated. And integration can't be outmaneuvered. It doesn't compete. It doesn't escalate. It doesn't fragment under pressure. It absorbs and remains intact. That realization followed him everywhere. Into conversations, into meetings, into moments where he would normally assert control. He found himself pausing, listening longer, speaking less. Not because he was trying to change, but because the old reflexes felt wrong, heavy, out of alignment. They noticed. The people who sent him, the ones who relied on his precision, they sensed hesitation, a delay where there used to be certainty. They assumed fatigue, told him to refocus, to sharpen his edge, to reassert dominance. He nodded, said the right things, but internally, something had shifted. The edge felt blunt now, not ineffective, unnecessary. He had seen a way of being that didn't require constant vigilance, and once you see that, the old way starts to feel like a cage. He wasn't questioning his skill. He was questioning the cost, and that question, once asked, doesn't go away. It expands, it presses, it demands answers. He began watching you more closely, not to dissect, but to understand. How you moved through pressure without tightening, how you spoke without posturing, how you held boundaries without aggression, how you remained open without being invaded. None of it fit his models, and that terrified him. Because models are what kept him safe. Models allowed him to predict, to control, to stay ahead. You were unpredictable not because you were chaotic, but because you weren't operating from fear. And fear is what most predictions are built on. He started to realize that all his intelligence had been spent learning how to manage fear, not transcend it. And you weren't managing it at all. You were beyond it, not fearless, just unruled. By the time he understood what was happening, it was too late to reverse. The process had begun. Not an external collapse, but an internal reconfiguration. The questions were multiplying. The certainty was thinning. And the person they sent to dismantle you was now dismantling his own assumptions, piece by piece, whether he wanted to or not. He thought he was there to reset you. He didn't realize he was standing in the presence of something that would reset him. And as that realization started to settle, as the first layers of his identity loosened their grip, he felt the ground shift beneath him in a way that would carry him forward into a confrontation with himself he could no longer postpone. And that confrontation didn't arrive dramatically. There was no single moment where everything shattered at once, no public breakdown, no visible failure. What came instead was slower, far more unsettling, a quiet erosion, the kind that doesn't announce itself, but changes how weight is distributed inside you. He started noticing pauses where instinct used to be, spaces between thought and action that had never existed before, moments where he would normally assert control, redirect conversation, dominate the narrative, and instead he hesitated, not out of fear, out of awareness. And that awareness felt dangerous, because it wasn't something he could turn off. He tried to drown it out by doubling down on what had always worked. Sharper analysis, more preparation, more mental rehearsal. He revisited old frameworks, refined his language, polished his delivery. He told himself he was recalibrating, that this was just refinement. But something was different. The tools still functioned, but they no longer satisfied. Each successful manipulation left a faint aftertaste he couldn't ignore, a sense of distance from himself, as if he were watching his own performance from the outside, aware of every move before he made it, yet unable to feel present inside it. That detachment unnerved him more than failure ever had. He began to realize that his intelligence had always moved ahead of his body, ahead of his emotions, ahead of his lived experience. He could explain anything, deconstruct anything, outsmart anyone. But he couldn't sit with himself without reaching for strategy. And now, after encountering you, that gap was exposed. You didn't live ahead of yourself. You lived inside yourself, fully. And the difference between those two states was no longer theoretical. He could feel it, in his chest, in his breath, in the way his thoughts no longer felt anchored. At first, he told no one. This kind of disturbance doesn't get shared easily, especially by someone whose identity is built on mastery. He maintained the surface, the same composure, the same sharpness. But internally, questions kept rising without his permission. Not abstract questions, personal ones. Why was he always scanning for advantage? Why did stillness feel threatening? Why did he feel more alive observing you than winning against others? These questions didn't arrive as thoughts alone. They came with sensation, tightness, restlessness, a low-grade unease that followed him even when he was alone. He tried to analyze you as a variable, a rare case, an exception, something he could isolate and neutralize conceptually. But the more he thought about you, the clearer it became that you weren't doing anything special. You weren't deploying techniques. You weren't practicing restraint as a tactic. You weren't withholding engagement to gain leverage. You were simply not fragmented. That was the difference. You weren't split between who you were and who you were trying to be. And that unity made every interaction with you feel clean. No residue, no distortion, just contact. And contact, unfiltered, was something he had avoided his entire life without realizing it. He started noticing how often he used complexity to create distance, long explanations, layered reasoning, intellectual depth that impressed others but kept them safely away. Complexity had been his armor, not because he needed to protect himself from others, but because it kept him from feeling exposed. You didn't use complexity that way. When you spoke, your words matched your internal state. There was no gap, no performance layer, and that alignment did something unsettling. It made his own misalignment impossible to ignore. Sleep became inconsistent. His mind replayed interactions not to refine strategy, but to examine himself. He'd remember moments where he could have steered the exchange, asserted dominance, proven superiority, and chose not to. Not consciously. The impulse simply wasn't there anymore. That absence frightened him, because it suggested change was happening without his consent. He had always believed control was the highest form of power. And now, control felt like resistance, like holding on to something that wanted to move. He found himself watching people differently, not as pieces in a mental map, but as individuals. He noticed tension in their shoulders, hesitation in their speech, the way they adjusted when he spoke. Before, this awareness had fueled his effectiveness. Now it made him uncomfortable. He began to see the cost of his presence. How often he extracted clarity at the expense of ease. How often people left conversations with him sharper but smaller. And then he thought of you. How people seem to expand around you without effort. How conversations opened instead of narrowed. That contrast haunted him. He tried to rationalize it again, told himself expansion was inefficient, that clarity required pressure, that comfort bred complacency. These arguments had always satisfied him before. Now they felt brittle. He could sense the fear underneath them, fear of losing relevance, fear of being ordinary, fear of not being needed. He realized how much of his identity depended on being the smartest person in the room, how much safety he derived from that position, and how fragile that safety actually was, because it required constant maintenance, constant proof, constant vigilance. You didn't seem to need any of that, and that difference felt like an accusation, even though you had never accused him of anything. The realization hit quietly one evening. He wasn't exhausted from working too much. He was exhausted from performing constantly, from monitoring himself, from anticipating reactions, from calculating outcomes. That mental load had been so familiar, he'd mistaken it for competence. But now, after encountering someone who carried no such load, the difference was undeniable. You moved through interactions without friction. He moved through them like a machine, under strain. And once you feel that contrast in your own body, you can't unknow it. He avoided you for a while, not out of resentment, but because being near you intensified the process. Your presence accelerated his internal questioning, and he wasn't ready to face where it might lead. He needed time to adjust, to stabilize, to convince himself he could integrate this disturbance without losing himself. But avoidance didn't stop the shift. It only slowed it. Your influence wasn't tied to proximity anymore. It had already entered his internal landscape. It surfaced in moments of choice, in the space before reaction, in the hesitation that now preceded assertion. He started revisiting his past, not nostalgically, but analytically. Childhood moments where intelligence had been rewarded while emotion was dismissed. Early experiences where being sharp meant being safe, where understanding replaced connection. He saw how early it had begun, how quickly he learned to stay ahead rather than stay present, how being admired for his mind became a substitute for being known as a person. These insights didn't arrive gently. They came with grief, with the realization that much of his life had been spent avoiding vulnerability, not because it was dangerous, but because it was unfamiliar. He finally sought you out again, not to challenge, not to analyze, simply to be in the same space. The interaction was brief, ordinary, on the surface. No deep conversation, no dramatic exchange, but internally, it landed with weight. He noticed how his body responded around you now. Less tension, less vigilance. He wasn't trying to read you. He wasn't scanning for advantage. He was just there. And that state felt unfamiliar, but relieving. Like setting down a bag he'd been carrying for so long, he'd forgotten it wasn't part of him. He didn't tell you what was happening inside him. Not because he was hiding it, but because he didn't need to externalize it. This wasn't something to be processed verbally, yet it was happening at a deeper level. A recalibration of how he oriented himself to the world. He realized that your impact came not from what you said, but from what you didn't need. You didn't need to win. You didn't need to dominate. You didn't need to be right. You didn't need to be admired. And that absence of need created a kind of gravitational pull. not seductive, stabilizing. The people around him started noticing changes they couldn't name. He was still effective, still sharp, but less aggressive, less confrontational. He didn't seize control of conversations the way he used to. He allowed others to finish thoughts. He asked questions without hidden angles. Some interpreted this as restraint, others as fatigue. A few sensed something deeper, though they couldn't articulate it. They just felt different around him, less pressured, less measured. And that feedback loop reinforced the shift. He saw that reducing performance didn't reduce impact. It changed its quality. Privately, the internal dialogue intensified. If intelligence didn't have to dominate, what was it for? If control wasn't the goal, what replaced it? These questions didn't have immediate answers, and for the first time in his life, he allowed questions to exist without resolution. That was new, uncomfortable, but also liberating. He realized how much of his certainty had been a response to discomfort, a way to close loops quickly. To avoid sitting in ambiguity, you didn't rush closure. You allowed things to remain open, and in that openness, something reorganized naturally. He began to sense the deeper implication of what had happened between you. You hadn't challenged his worldview directly. You'd made it obsolete by not needing it. You didn't argue against his approach. You demonstrated another orientation so complete that argument became unnecessary. And that was the real disruption, not intellectual defeat. Existential displacement. The ground he'd been standing on was still there, but it no longer felt like home. And ahead of him, there was no clear path yet. Just space. Space he'd avoided his entire life. That space frightened him. But it also called to him. Because in that space, there was no role to maintain, no image to project, no hierarchy to navigate. Just presence, just being. He didn't know how to live there yet, but he could feel that staying where he was would now require effort. And once effort becomes resistance, change is no longer optional, it's only delayed. The process you'd initiated without intention continued unfolding, quietly, relentlessly. And as he stood on the edge of that internal threshold, sensing that his old identity could no longer carry him forward, one question began to surface with increasing clarity, demanding to be faced next. That question was simple, almost absurd in its clarity, and yet it carried the weight of a lifetime of misdirection. Who am I, if not the role I've built? He had built himself meticulously, like a fortress of habits, strategies, and projections. Every achievement, every conversation, every carefully calibrated reaction was a brick, a beam, a defense. That identity had protected him, elevated him, distinguished him. But now he could feel the mortar loosening, the beams creaking under the weight of presence he had never allowed himself to inhabit. For decades, he had moved through the world as a set of responses and premeditated actions. And suddenly, the scaffolding was optional and terrifyingly empty. He started noticing subtle ways his old armor interfered with living. The way he clenched his jaw automatically during conversations. The way his hands curled into fists when interrupted. The way his voice, so trained to command, carried tension even in neutral statements. He realized these were not signs of dominance or power. They were signs of a prisoner, someone performing readiness for a battle that existed only in anticipation. You had never performed. You hadn't needed to. And that lack of performance was contagious, a kind of invisible gravity pulling him toward a state of authenticity he couldn't yet name. For the first time, he saw his life in patterns he couldn't engineer around. Meetings, dinners, exchanges that had once felt like games, arenas, or tests now appeared as loops of repetition, the same faces, the same conversations, the same performances, repeated endlessly. And in the spaces between, he began to recognize a void, not one he feared, but one he had always avoided. You had occupied that void effortlessly. You had allowed moments to exist without filling them with intent. You had moved through reality without manipulating it, and now he wanted to understand how that was possible. He started reading, not for strategy, not to find angles or tools for influence. He read philosophy, psychology, the science of emotion, the mechanics of human attachment, literature exploring the interior lives of others. Each page chipped away at the structures he had relied on. Each insight revealed that the mental games he had mastered were protective, not progressive. They were scaffolding built to avoid self-confrontation. They were rituals designed to preserve image and status, not understanding. And he recognized the cost, how much of himself he had forfeited in exchange for perceived mastery. Gradually, the world started to mirror his internal shift. Spaces where he had once felt tension and competition softened. Colleagues no longer braced in anticipation. Conversations no longer required mental sparring. The constant measurement of influence and reaction dissolved. And in that space, something extraordinary happened. He began to trust himself, not to manipulate or control outcomes, but to exist alongside them. Decisions became less about advantage and more about alignment. The difference was subtle, but profound. His old framework of dominance and strategy no longer guided him. Presence and observation did. And once that switch flipped, it was irreversible. The first confrontation with the truth came quietly. He reflected on the relationships he had built on performance, the friendships and alliances constructed on controlled impression. He realized many were shallow, transactional, or conditional. And yet he remembered the way people interacted around you, not out of obligation, fear, or reward, but freely. They were responsive to your presence, not defensive against it. That contrast hit him like a revelation. Influence without domination, connection without performance. And he understood viscerally that all the skill and training in the world had never achieved that. The more he observed, the more he recognized his own prior blindness. How often had he mistaken compliance for respect, submission for agreement, noise for engagement? All of it had been a house of cards, and you had no hand in knocking it down. You had simply refused to feed the structure. You had existed fully, and in doing so, you exposed the hollow mechanics of what he had always relied on. That exposure was quiet, almost imperceptible, but the impact was seismic internally. He felt a tremor that had no origin outside himself. One night, in the solitude of his apartment, he realized something terrifying. He had always feared losing control, but now he craved release. He wanted to see what it was like not to be strategizing at every moment. He wanted to explore what it meant to respond authentically, instead of calculating his moves. He wanted to inhabit his own presence fully, without the scaffolding of identity and role. And for the first time in decades, he understood the cost of pretending mastery while remaining fragmented. That realization carried grief, yes, but also a faint, tentative hope. The people who had sent him noticed the shift, not immediately, but eventually. They saw a subtle softening, a hesitation in the patterns they had come to expect. They accused, they pressed, they tried to provoke the old reflexes, and he found himself laughing, not outwardly, not visibly, but internally at the absurdity of their assumptions. They didn't understand that the transformation had nothing to do with them. It wasn't rebellion, It wasn't resistance. It wasn't strategy. It was simply alignment. And alignment cannot be forced, manipulated, or reversed. It must be discovered, and once discovered, it cannot be unlearned. Then came the day he reached out, not with a plan, not with intent to manipulate or win. Just a text, just a question, a simple acknowledgement that he needed to speak to someone who had seen him not as a mechanism, not as a role, but as a person. And when you met, there was no performance on either side, no pretension, no strategy, no need to impress, only presence, only observation, only humanity. And in that quiet exchange, years of internal tension, fear, and misalignment began to unwind. He spoke, and for the first time, someone listened without judgment, without correction, without the silent measurement that had dominated his life. What poured out of him was raw, unedited, unstructured. Years of armor, of intellect turned into defense, of vigilance turned into vigilance without purpose. The words were heavy, but not burdensome to you. You received them without adding anything, without performing guidance. You held space, simply being present. And that presence allowed the fracture to become a realignment. Not a collapse, not a repair, but a birth. And when it ended, he realized he was no longer operating under compulsion. He had left the scaffolding behind. He was free to engage the world from himself, not the image he had built. Over the following weeks, he tested this new state. He stopped micromanaging interactions. He allowed uncertainty. He permitted vulnerability. He experimented with honesty, not as strategy, but as an expression of self. Each test succeeded in a way his old rules could never predict. Authority no longer required demonstration. Influence no longer required coercion. Power, in its truest form, existed simply as presence. And he began to understand that the apex predator they had sent to destroy you had been dismantled, not by skill, not by confrontation, not by manipulation, but by witnessing the freedom of someone unbound. The final step came quietly, almost imperceptibly. He returned to spaces he had dominated for years. Corporate mixers, boardrooms, social gatherings. The difference was subtle, but the energy was entirely new. People expected the same patterns, the same authority-driven maneuvers. He didn't perform, he didn't strategize, he simply existed. And the rooms responded differently. People didn't flinch, they didn't compete, they didn't adjust or scheme. They met him as a person, and in doing so, they reinforced what he had already begun to internalize. Identity built on authenticity carries far more force than identity built on performance. Eventually, he found you again in one of those rooms, and this time, the exchange was brief. Words were unnecessary. A glance, a recognition, a subtle nod. Gratitude filled the space. He had been sent to break you, but instead, he had been broken and rebuilt from the inside out. The weapon they crafted to dismantle had become the first human to step fully into himself because of your presence, your constancy, your refusal to engage in their games. That realization wasn't just humbling, it was revolutionary. You didn't change him, you didn't persuade him, you didn't teach or manipulate. You simply existed authentically, and that existence acted as a catalyst. And once someone experiences this, once they step into themselves without masks, the old frameworks of dominance, control, and manipulation crumble irreversibly. He would never return to his former state. He had witnessed another way of being, and that truth could not be unlearned. The apex predator, the mind breaker, the instrument of strategy, the carefully honed tool of influence. They had all been illusions, not because he failed, but because he finally confronted the only force that could reset him, the reality of living fully as himself. And that reality was unstoppable, contagious, liberating, and entirely irreversible. He had been sent to dismantle you, and instead, he became free. And in that freedom, he understood the most dangerous lesson of all. True power is never in the performance. True power is in the courage to exist fully, openly, and authentically. And once discovered, it can never be contained. And that is the final, irrevocable shift. He will no longer operate in their binary world of winners and losers, manipulators and prey. That world cannot contain him anymore. He has become aligned with something far greater, far quieter, far more dangerous than any mind-breaking tactics could ever produce. Presence, authenticity, and self-alignment. These are the forces that cannot be outmaneuvered, outwitted, or dismantled. They exist internally, silently, invisibly, yet they carry absolute authority. The weapon sent to destroy you now walks in the world as a liberated being. Not because someone handed him freedom, not because he was convinced, not because he learned a lesson, simply because he remembered himself. And that memory, once ignited, reshapes everything around him. Nothing will ever be the same for him, for the people around him, or for anyone who witnesses what happens when a mind breaker meets someone who cannot be broken. That is the quiet revolution. That is the uncontainable truth. That is the final reality he now inhabits, and there is no returning